Welcome in to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Erik Skopil on the show. As always, I'm Matt Prehm. It is a Friday. It's going to be originally a preview podcast into a loaded five-star weekend for Oregon football on the recruiting trail. But we had some late breaking news Thursday night. We've worked diligently over the last 12 hours or so trying to get some form of confirmation. Matt Zenitz of 24/7 Sports early this morning did some confirming on behalf of 24/7 Sports that Evan Stewart, Oregon star expected number one receiver, has suffered a injury this summer, and it sounds like he's going to be potentially out for. We won't see this the entire season because that's unfair yet to Evan Stewart, but it doesn't sound good. It sounds like a good chunk of the year could be lost to an injury for Evan Stewart. And Erik, this was one that like we got reached out by somebody else in our network early Thursday morning asking about it, and we instantly were like, well, it was an injury he suffered in spring football, but no one really anticipated it being a season-long injury. But it sounds like this is another one. But there were enough smoke around this fire that we feel confident like something has happened, and it's a big blow to this Oregon football program because it's a new unit. There's a lot of new faces, and Evan is expected to be kind of your go-to number one guy at least week one. That could change by week 4 or 5, but this was supposed to be your number one big play alpha dog in the room, and now it sounds like he's not going to be available at all.
Yeah, and remember, back to just kind of the, I guess, timeline here. He missed the Rose Bowl with a back injury. I believe, my understanding, and of course, Dan doesn't talk injuries, but in like the few people we could kind of get to talk about, I believe that same injury lingered and was the reason he missed most of spring, or I guess the spring game. We didn't get to watch practice, so I couldn't tell you how much he practiced or didn't. That was my understanding, which is why, to Matt's point, when somebody reached out and was like, is he out for the season? We were like, with the back injury, that seems unlikely. And yeah, this sounds like it's a knee injury. Even when Matt Zenitz of 24/7 and CBS reported this morning, following up on a report, we'll give credit to College Football Headlines, who broke it late last night. This even Matt acknowledged this was a injury suffered this week. So a very recent injury. You know, the initial report says out for the season. We weren't able to confirm that. I don't know if that's necessarily known. I think that's maybe like the worst case scenario. But like, I think you have to now talk about it as if like you're not going to expect to have him for most of, if not all, the regular season, and maybe you don't have him at all in 2025. And like to your point, Matt, when you were looking at this receiving room and when we were talking about it, it was always like, hey, they're going to be breaking in some new starters, but hey, they have Evan Stewart here, who's this kind of like enigmatic figure, right? He had like 4 really awesome games last season, and then a couple of, and then the rest of it was pretty limited in production. I think I had the stat at one point where I want to say he had like 80% of his production over those 4 games a season ago. And so the hope was like, hey, this is going to be your new kind of alpha. Like you said, I think that's the right word. He's going to hopefully be a little more consistent this year, but this guy has all NFL talent. Like people are still putting him in first round mock drafts as recently as a couple of weeks ago. Like there's a sense this is a really talented player. And now, Matt, like where do you go? And the answers are like, there's a lot of young players that are exciting, but there's very little proven talent on this roster right now.
Yeah, that's going to be the concern here. And I think positive isn't the right word to use, the appropriate word to use, but if you're going to find some kind of positive spin on this, is
a silver lining, Matt.
Maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
It happened June 5th, June 6th, giving you 3 months basically to kind of formulate a alternative game plan for how you operate if he's not going to be available for the start of the season, for the first half of the season, for all of the season.
Yep.
It's a lot easier to maneuver a significant injury to a team before the season even starts than it is mid-year. And it kind of also is going to set the tone that some of these young guys, hey, like there is going to be no gradual drop in. You're not going to ease your way into the season now. You have to be ready. You have to perform. And that's going to set the tone for all of offseason work for a lot of these guys, because all of their roles are going to get significantly bigger moving forward. I think the importance of Gary Bryant staying healthy is going to become critical just from a leadership standpoint, from a understanding of the offense standpoint. Justice Lowe's development is going to have to go higher. Kyler Casper's health will need to be really good because he missed most of last season with his own injury. He will need to be available. Jerion Dickey, like, this is your time to shine now, Jerion. Like, this is a player that has 5-star NFL physical traits, and can you put it together on the field now? But it's going to go back to, I think, ultimately, Decorian Moore, the true freshman receiver, already was going to have a big load on his shoulders to be a guy for this team. And it feels like that role, that expectation, that commitment is probably going to become even more now for Decorian Moore. And that's hard to place. Even if a receiver is a position a true freshman can play quickly, it's still hard to place on a true freshman.
That's the first thing my head went is, okay, who's the alpha now? And I think we both agree, and I would guess most fans listening, that like as good of a blocker and like supplementary piece as both Justice Lowe and Gary Bryant can be, I don't think either of them are ready to be like number ones on an offense that's trying to do something special in this type of a conference. And so you go down the list here and you go like, who's that guy? And it feels like it should be Decorian, and this is an incredible opportunity for him. I just did a spot a couple of days ago for CBS Sports talking about like what's the importance of him being, up to par or on standard with some of these other big time freshmen of the last couple of seasons. Like no one's going to compare him to Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State necessarily, but like some of these other big time receivers who come in and have immediate impacts. And my plan had kind of been like, I think it's necessary that he's ready to contribute some, but I'm not sure you need him to be 1,000-yard receiver or even your leading receiver because Evan Stewart's there. And well, that situation and conversation has changed a little bit now. And so I'm totally with you. Like, I think you look at this and you go like Decorian, and I hate to put this pressure on a true freshman because it's completely unfair, but to a certain point, like you really hope he's ready to be what the best case of this could be. You know what I mean? And like, true freshmen don't really play much under Dan Lanning. Like we've run through the stats on this podcast plenty of times. I won't bore you guys with it again, but like the track record's not great with true freshmen being integrated. I think this is a case where clearly he's going to be a focal point of this. Like I posted something on the board on, I think Tuesday, of like the predicting the true freshmen who would play the most. And I had, I think 3 guys playing, and somebody said, well, Dan Lanning doesn't play true freshmen. Well, he needs to now. Like, I don't think there's any alternative. And then how do you shore up the rest of the room? Like, Matt, it's interesting. Like, if you assume it's going to be more Bryant and Lowe, which I don't know if that's fair, like who else fills in? I just think that the whole room kind of, you take out one key piece and you try to figure out how the rest of the puzzle pieces fit together, and it kind of throws everything out of whack. So like, is what we saw to Dylan Gresham in the spring game, is that real enough where we can rely on him to be, your number 2 or your number 3 receiver? Is that super far-fetched? You mentioned Kyler and Jerion to kind of, I used the term enigmatic earlier, but like they're even more of that because neither of them has either been healthy enough to contribute or ready to contribute when they've been healthy. Or can one or both of those guys step up? And then I look at even Jeremiah McClellan and Cooper Perry, 2 younger players who are maybe not quite as heralded or don't have quite the attention of some of the names we've mentioned already, and go like, those guys need to be ready too. Like this is kind of an all hands on deck situation. I don't expect you're going to suddenly see Oregon play like 6 receivers regularly, right? But at the same time, like who are the top 4 or 5? Because Oregon will rotate that many. It's kind of hard to get a sense of that right now. And I would imagine for Ross Douglas, this is like probably really disappointing to lose to it, but maybe exciting just to see what these young players are able to do to kind of step up and fill up what is going to be, again, a very different receiver room than initially anticipated, at least.
A wild card name to keep in your back pocket is Malik Benson.
That's like the only one we haven't brought up. You're right. I totally spaced on him. I didn't even think about him.
A transfer from Florida State, spent the year before that at Alabama. His 2 years in college football have not been very productive. You can argue some of that is poor play at the quarterback position because we all know that You can have as talented a receiver room as you possibly could have, and if you don't have a competent quarterback, those guys have very limited opportunities to make plays. I think some of that played a factor in his development specifically at Florida State.
Yeah.
He has a case of drops, but hit him at Alabama a little bit. If he can smooth things out and he can kind of put that potential that he showed as an All-American at the JUCO level, which, by the way, 5-star JUCO player, dynamic recruit, everyone was after him. If he can replicate what he was doing at the JUCO level in his final season of college football, that changes the dynamic of the room for Oregon. And obviously you would have loved to have Evan Stewart plus Malik Benson, but this could be a guy that could do a little bit of the same things that Evan Stewart did this past season. Now, is it fair to ask him to be a 1,000-yard receiver, which Evan Stewart wasn't last year? No, that feels unfair to Malik Benson. But I think the short answer to our question, Eric, is this is now going to be a by committee type approach of, I don't think there's an Evan Stewart in this room outside of Decory and Moore, and you don't want to lean on a true freshman. So you're going to need to, Justice Lowe is going to need to up his production a little bit more. Gary Bryant's going to have to up his production a little bit more. Jeremiah McClellan, Malik Benson, Dylan Gresham will have to do a little bit more. Maybe Cooper Perry goes from being a redshirt player to a guy that now has to play in 12 games because he has to play 4 or 5 snaps on special teams and 7 or 8 snaps on offense to make sure guys are the depth of the room is good. Everyone's going to have to do just a little bit more now without Evan Stewart here. Is this a death blow to Oregon? Absolutely not.
No.
I don't believe that in the slightest. This is just one that it's a big hill you're going to have to climb. But as we've seen years before, Oregon can get past it. It's just you now have to adjust your game plan.
And I'll just throw one more name that we haven't brought up that we already knew was going to be a big part of the pass game that now I wonder, just like, does he get used a little bit differently even, is Kenyon Sadiq. Like, do we see him? He's already, I feel like I'm creating a narrative that doesn't need to be created because he's already like a pseudo wide receiver. But I just think that this opens up the opportunity for, like, he had talked about breaking Terrence Ferguson's single season, tight end receiving records, some of which just kind of fell this last year. I wouldn't be surprised now if those get absolutely demolished. Like, could we see him have a season? I'm not going to say statistically on par with like a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland, but that be the kind of role he has where he's really the focal point in a pass offense, even though he's a tight end, which is frankly something Oregon's. I don't know if that's ever really been the case in an Oregon offense, Matt. Like, I'm just thinking back to even like the Ed Dixon era. Like, they were always, these great tight ends were always paired with receivers that were kind of the primary top target. So that's probably, if like I'm going now through like a hierarchy of like who's going to lead the team in receiving,
Sadiq goes way to the top.
Sadiq now to me is number one probably, and I don't know if that's totally fair either because he's still somebody we haven't really seen it from. But I think there's even that to me is, if you're an Oregon fan going like, oh my gosh, this stinks. Just like, don't forget you have a ton of talented receivers. I was just looking at it. I think they signed 8, 4, or 5 stars the last 3 cycles or last 4 cycles under Dan. And then they have also got this guy named Kenyon Sadiq, who everyone's really, really excited about. So this sucks. And I feel really bad for Evan if this costs him this season. Because, like, think about it this way, Matt. This was probably the most important season of his football career because NFL draft stock didn't take the shape it wanted to last year. Kind of a weird season. Like, had the awesome game against Boise State, the awesome game against Ohio State, was the go-to guy. I think it was in the Wisconsin game. Like, there was these moments of like, oh man, this guy is for real. And then there was a bunch of moments of like, where is he? He's not here.
Where did he go?
Yeah. And this was supposed to be the season where he kind of solidified some of that and showed some more consistency and like still somebody people in the NFL are really intrigued by. Now he loses that year, parts of that year. What's he like post recovery? We don't know enough to really suggest, but I can just point out like Noah Whittington, it took him, I thought, pretty much all of last year to get back from what was a serious knee injury. I don't know if it'll be the same for Evan, but like these are the things, unfortunately, you kind of go through your brain after something that's like this goes down. So I hate that's how we're starting this show in in early June, which is a time of year where usually we're talking recruiting and getting excited about the season.
Potential.
Yeah. And now it's kind of like, this is kind of a bit of a snag in the process here, which is too bad.
Let's shift now towards recruiting, though. Let's talk some positive news here, because this is a big weekend for Oregon from a recruiting standpoint. You hear the number of players that are on campus, it's right around 10, and you think that's not anything out of the ordinary from a numbers perspective of official visitors. But you look at the group of players that are here, and it's a wide collection of five-star players. Five stars are on campus this weekend for official visits. It starts with Jet Washington, a five-star safety, a top 18 player in the country, the number 2 player at the safety position. Tyler Atkinson, the number 20 player overall in the country, the number 2 linebacker. He hails from Georgia. He's here this weekend. Calvin Russell, another 5-star, the number 21 player in the country, the number 3 receiver nationally. You look at Brandon Arrington, an athlete recruited on the defensive and offensive side of the football by Oregon. He's the number 29 player overall, the number 2 player in the state of California. He's here. And then Joey O'Brien, another 5-star athlete, probably a defensive back, safety type player, based out of Pennsylvania, number 30th overall in the country. He's here. You've also got 2 commitments in Tristan Phillips and Xavier Larice, 2 defensive backs or defensive players. Phillips is a linebacker, Larice is a safety. Other official visitors here on campus include Jax Tanner. He's a 4-star, 3-star composite interior offensive lineman from Idaho. And then Messiah Hampton will show up mid-weekend, towards the end of the weekend, a 4-star receiver who's ranked inside the top 200. Erik, this is a wide collection of talent, and this is easy for me to say of like, hey, like give me your top 3 most impressive guys from a film perspective, from a film fit perspective, and we could pick 3 5-stars, and that's easy enough. But let's start with, I think, maybe some needs here. Tyler Atkinson, linebacker, number 2 player at the position nationally. Just why? What do we see here with the fit for Oregon? What makes him so special for Oregon besides just the pure always a 5-star?
Well, first off, there's a pretty significant need at linebacker. And actually, one of the fun things about going through this process yesterday was rewatching Tristan Phillips' film and being reminded of how fun he is. Like a pairing of Phillips and Atkinson. I know there's a huge discrepancy in the recruiting rankings. I'm just looking at it now. Phillips is the 212th player in the country. As you just said, Atkinson the 20th. But like they're both really explosive, dynamic athletes. And like Atkinson, I wrote in my little kind of breakdown on the story, and you go check that out over at duckterritory.com. The story is what Oregon star-studded weekend official visitors show on film and how they'd fit in the class. Atkinson, I wrote, like he looks like that prototype SEC linebacker, like the way he moves, the way he hits players, the ferocity. Like there's some plays in there that you're like, that's probably targeting. like that's probably something you're going to get flagged for at the next level. But like he just plays with that kind of reckless abandon that you like from linebackers. I hate to make this comparison on an Oregon podcast specifically, but like it reminded me a little bit of watching Justin Flo's highlight tape, to be honest. Both of these
Very
guys
aggressive player.
Exactly. Both of these guys are big, athletic, and super physical. Like not only do they not like shy away from contact, like they like seek it out. Like they want to dole out punishment. You can see why he is. I think he's Max Prep's junior of the year nationally this last year. Like this is somebody who has all the accolades, and for good reason. He just won a state championship down in Georgia, playing at the highest level. Like this is one of those dudes, and like it's the recruiting ranking is like probably like so straightforward for the evaluators of like this guy has to be one of the best linebackers in the country. And if you're Oregon, like this is going to be awfully tough probably to win this battle. I mean, if you kind of look at who else he's looking at, it's all the teams you'd think for a 5-star linebacker out of Georgia. It's going to be extremely difficult, but if this is somebody you can land, this is like to me, this is kind of a Decorian more on defense of like, I wouldn't be surprised if you land this guy. There's going to be open spots in 26 with Betcher, graduating. What's Devin Jackson do? I imagine he's back, but like there's going to be some availability there. And like I could see Atkinson being, again, we're looking way down the road here. He's probably not even going to pick Oregon, or it would be impressive if he does. But you could see this being a guy who like steps in right away and is one of your top guys on defense.
Another position I think it's a need, just because of what the room could look like in 2 years. Safety, Jet Washington. This was the surprise addition to the group. Was expected to be, I believe, at USC this weekend.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That has changed. He's now at Oregon. Bishop Gorman, Las Vegas, a top 20 player in his own right, and he, from a body type perspective, or remind Duck fans of Brian Addison. He's 6'5". He's 200 pounds. He's super athletic. He's super rangy. Here, what's the fit that you like and the potential here with Jet Washington?
Yeah, I brought up both Brian Addison and Kingston Lopa as like these 6'5" safeties that have similar dimensions, but like Jet Washington, back to what I just talked about with Tyler Atkinson, like Matt, how many times did we see like Brian Addison just come over from the middle and just clobber a guy?
Oh, right? It was like once a game. It felt like.
Yeah, that's kind of this guy's thing to a certain level, except for then you throw on the fact that I think he has even better like athleticism, covers even more ground. Like this is like if you get this guy, the type of player Oregon's kind of needed at the back end. Like you think about the last couple of years, the teams they lost to in consequential games, and I guess the only teams they lost to being Washington and Ohio State, and just like kind of moments where you go, if that safety was like, I can see it with Bennett a couple of years ago. I can see it a couple of times with Evan of like, he's a stride short from getting to the ball and breaking up the pass, right? This guy's not going to have that sort of an issue with that length and athleticism. And then he's also he's mean out there. Again, similar to Atkinson. And like, I like that, you kind of go through a lot of the top defensive players that they're tripping out both this weekend and in this class. Like there's a lot of guys that played nasty. Like that's what you need from this defense. I'm sure watching this tape, people are going like, because when I was thinking of Brian Addison, especially coming up, it was like kind of felt, and you're right, man, he did end up knocking out some dudes and hitting players hard, but I always kind of, at least initially, was like, he's kind of more, felt like a little bit more finesse, quote unquote, and maybe that's not fair to Brian. This guy doesn't play that way at all, and is kind of a dog out there in a way that I think if he does end up at Oregon, Duck fans would be really excited about. Now, Matt, I don't know where you think this is at from like Oregon's likelihood. I think it's encouraging that, he took this trip and pushed aside one of the big rivals, but this is a guy that like Oregon's going to have a lot of, I think, challenge to pull, but gosh, if they can get this done, talk about just kind of a defining guy at the back end. And similar to what we're talking about with Atkinson, like Thieneman's probably going to be gone in 26, maybe not, maybe he's back, but either way, there's going to be opportunity right away for a guy like this.
It's easy to say this about a 5-star, but this would be a cornerstone piece of your recruiting class. Like one that defines where things go from a class perspective. All right. Last one from a fit. I think, from a body type, this is an absolute must-get type player. Calvin Russell, 6'5", 195 pounds. We talked about this when Chris Henry Jr. shut down his recruitment, wouldn't flip to Oregon from Ohio State, and then Wyatt Dixon, when he committed to Ohio State over Oregon. It was clear that they have been trying to find a bigger receiver because they don't have very many of them on roster right now. And this feels like maybe their best chance for a dynamic player. What makes him so dynamic as a 6'5" bigger receiver? They're in on other guys that are talented at the receiver position, but they're smaller.
Yeah, he's kind of an interesting film in that, like, you hear 6'5" and you think like maybe there's a lot of like jump balls on film or a lot of like contested catches. And I'm not saying there isn't some of that, but a lot of it is like he's 6'5", has really long strides and just runs by everybody. Like it kind of reminded me a little bit of like an AJ Green, Randy Moss. I'm not saying that they're like one-to-one comparisons, but just like these long rangy guys who just run by everybody. I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of like nuance to the route running. It's a lot of just like either, simple slants or crossing routes and then just balls down the field. Like it's kind of what he's doing. But with that sort of size and speed, he separates like really impressively. I'd be curious to see like what an electric 40 would be for this kind of a guy. Cause you watch him and it's impressive just like how subtle and I would say like the ease and effortlessness of how he like just gets past players. Cause it doesn't feel like he's ever working very hard. He just has that gear where he just kind of glides by everybody and then is able to make the catch. So like a fascinating player in that, like he's also, Matt, to your point, like Oregon has, I think Kyler Casper is the only receiver over 6'2", 6'3" on this roster. Who knows if I guess Kyler probably will be here in 26. Who knows? He'd have eligibility to be. But like, this could be your tallest receiver by a wide margin, but it could also be like your deep threat. It's kind of an interesting combination of a player who checks several boxes while also being somebody who could be a contested catch guy. I just didn't see quite as much of it on film as maybe I was expecting when you're talking about a guy with this kind of size.
Yeah, he's an interesting prospect from Florida, Northwestern High School. There is a need, though, whether it's him or someone else. They need to find a big physical guy. And maybe that's not his 100% MO, but they need to find someone that's in that like 6'2 to 6'6, 6'5 range that can go across the middle and can get those high balls that fly, maybe sail on the quarterback a little bit or lower the shoulder after catching it. And maybe that's him. I don't know. But they've got a chance. That's the thing here is they've got a chance. They got a good chance with a lot of these guys to pull some commitments in.
Yeah, Matt, let's go there now. And maybe it's as simple as let's talk about the other receiver who is going to be on campus a little later this weekend, Messiah Hampton. I know he's set to announce on, I guess, a week from today on June 13th is his commitment date. Four-star wide receiver out of Rochester, New York. Really fun film to watch. It's also a reminder in kind of a weird way that like New York high school football is not elite high school football by any means, because there's some plays that he makes on there that it's like, yeah, that's probably not translating to the next level. But with Messiah, where do you think Oregon stands? It seems like from all indications like they're in a pretty good spot, and if this visit goes well, this could be going someplace.
This is receiver coach Ross Douglas's player to lose. Really good relationship with him prior to Ross Douglas coming over from Syracuse. The Orange actually have him on an official visit this weekend, and then he'll come in for a end of weekend, early next week visit, and then he'll make his decision, like you said, on June 13th. He's also seen Miami. He previously has also seen Penn State. This would be a pretty big dagger if Oregon doesn't land the commitment from Messiah Hampton. I think this is probably the most likely candidate of the group to pull the trigger. Obviously, he's making a decision in a week, and we'll know then kind of when it happens. But fluid receiver, can do a lot of different things. Oregon's in a good position because of their brand, because of their playing opportunities, because of their offense, because of their relationship with Ross Douglas, Will Stein's offense, past production of the receiver room. And this is a guy that I would chalk up as very, going to have just as much of an opportunity to play next season as a true freshman as anyone else on this team this year. I mean, Cooper Perry showed up as like the bottom receiver of the group, and he's already, before the Evan Stewart stuff, was pushing his way into playing time. I think Messiah Hampton's going to have that same opportunity. So if we're gonna talk about a player that's close to committing to Oregon, this is probably the most likely candidate of this group that's going to be here this weekend.
Let me throw out another name who actually has at one point been committed to Oregon, but is no longer committed to Oregon. Yeah. What are we thinking about cannonball enthusiast Richard Wesley?
I love that. He's got official visits set for August 30th to Ohio State. He'll see Texas end of June, middle of June. He's back here in Eugene this weekend. Mm-hmm. I've got a suspicion, though, Eric, that those two visits might not happen. Maybe the Texas one does. Richard Wesley obviously wants to be at Oregon. He committed like 30 days ago.
That's the craziest commitment. He's been committed, decommitted, and visits all within like 25 days.
Yes. And then 17 days after he committed, without his parents on campus, mind you, I think that's the important part. He backed off that commitment per his dad, and they are going to go through the circles. But their first visit officially after decommitting is back here at Oregon. Mom and dad are expected to be on campus this weekend. I just got this feeling that things are going to get ironed out. And I think Richard Wesley wants to be at Oregon. Mm-hmm. I think the parents are probably good with it too. It was probably a case of just, hey, like, we didn't talk about this. Let's decommit. Let's be real. Let's be honest up front with Oregon. And then we're going to give them a shot to get us back in the fold first. And if we don't like what happens this weekend, then we'll go and take these other trips. So, am I saying Richard Wesley is going to commit this weekend? No, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest, but I imagine there's a real good chance here that in the next 2 weeks, maybe Richard shuts it down and doesn't take that trip to Texas, or maybe he takes the trip to Texas, evaluates his options in the dead period, and makes a commitment in July and doesn't see Ohio State in end of August.
Yeah, here's a name, Matt, that I'll throw at you, who just recently set a commitment date. Oregon is not considered the favorite, and that's 5-star Joey O'Brien, athlete from Pennsylvania, set for June 20th. Again, I think he nailed that day down sometime this week.
Yep.
Where are we thinking Oregon's at here? I know the crystal ball is listing Penn State and Notre Dame as the two favorites. That makes sense geographically, but any indication like Oregon with a really good weekend could kind of mix things up a little bit here?
I think they could make it interesting, but this one feels more like he's going to stay closer to home. Penn State obviously is the in-state school. Notre Dame has had a lot of traction here for a while. I think Oregon's running third, and it doesn't help that Notre Dame gets the last visit before he makes his decision. He'll be there next weekend. He saw Penn State, though, about a month ago. So Nittany Lions are going to have to sweat this one out. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if Notre Dame kind of swoops in here late and maybe makes it a 1A, 1B with Penn State, and they're the two schools. But I think Oregon's going to have to absolutely knock it out of the park. Obviously, the weather here in Eugene this weekend is unbelievably awesome. Mom and dad are going to be here. Obviously, the playing time is going to be there to offer him. Chris Hampton's reputation continues to grow. Tosh Lupoy as a defensive coordinator is as respected as anyone out there in the country. And then Dan Lanning is Dan Lanning. So Oregon's defensive staff and their focus there on that side of the ball will make a big impression. But I just look at it as you're running third right now going into the weekend. It's going to have to be an unbelievable visit. And I hate to use like the sell job here, but the recruiting pitch is going to have to be unbelievably crystal clear and dynamic and very thorough and just blows you away in the presentation for Oregon to kind of jump two teams to get into that top spot and then survive a Notre Dame visit and survive probably a late push from Penn State to stay home in the state school. So
yeah,
it's not out of the picture, but I would be shocked if we're on the shock side if Joey O'Brien lands with Oregon.
Well, and I'd say I would never have anticipated they would hold him either. But sure. I just think of Trey McNutt last year, like an Ohio State, in-state kid, connections to that school. I think a legacy ends up committing to Oregon and then signs with Oregon. Like it's not impossible, but to your point, Matt, like there'd be so much local pressure and so much Penn State, especially just because, and I think the high school's, I don't know, a couple hours from Penn State University. Like that would be difficult. Can I throw one more at you whose name we haven't talked about? And that's just like, where are things with Jax Tanner? Because this is a guy I know, like the two of us, we've talked about him for, since probably not even the start of the 2025 calendar year, as like, this guy's probably somebody that Oregon will end up with ultimately. Like you mentioned Messiah Hampton. We know he's got a commitment date coming up. That's probably the most quick we could see a commitment. But like, could Tanner be somebody who sneaks in there, and is actually the first one to commit this month, do you think?
He was at Michigan last weekend. He'll go to Tennessee following this weekend's trip to Oregon, and he'll wrap up June with a trip to BYU. I honestly think it's going to be a 3-team race: Michigan, Oregon, BYU. We should also note he's planning on taking a religious mission after high school. So the school that he does commit to, he won't be enrolling in the fall of 2026 to play his football there. So there's going to be a delay in his recruitment a little bit. But I think Oregon's got a great chance. I'm just sneaky suspicious of BYU. And, they've become a really attractive school for a lot of programs across, a lot of sports across men's and women's athletics. NIL has changed the game for them.
Yep.
They've got an unbelievable package that they offer. It looks like Rider Lions could be trending that way as well. Mm-hmm. They just signed recently the number 1 player in college basketball, who's probably going to be the NBA first draft pick next year. So there's a lot of positive things going BYU's way right now. I do think, though, Oregon's got a good chance. Above weight, they've positioned themselves really well. He was here for the Boise State game for his first visit. He came back, I think, in like late November, I think, for the Washington game. Was also here during January's junior day visit. He's been here a ton.
Yeah.
He's familiar. He knows the program. He knows the staff. This would be one, though, like if we're going to put most likely to commit, 2 or 3 names, he would be on it. I would not be blown away shocked if he pulls the trigger during or shortly after the visit that he commits to Oregon. I just think it's a tight race between Michigan, BYU. You can't throw away Tennessee either, but I think those 3, BYU, Oregon, and Michigan, are probably kind of the 3 players right now.
Yeah.
All right. That's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another one. Enjoy your off season. Enjoy second to last week of school for you parents out here. Counting down the days. I'm sure your kids are. But until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.